All right. So, have you ever wondered like when Lord Ram might have actually walked the Earth? Well, get this. We're about to go on a deep dive into some serious astronomical detective work
Oh, wow.
to try and find out.
Very cool.
Our main source for this deep dive is going to be excerpts from Dating the Era of Lord Ram by Pushkar Bhatnagar.
Okay.
And this book takes a totally unique approach using planetary positions that are described in the Valmiki Ramayana
Right.
to try and pinpoint actual dates for events in Ram's life.
It's pretty fascinating stuff because instead of just relying on, artifacts or inscriptions, Bhatnagar uses ancient India's incredibly precise astronomical knowledge. These astronomers were very meticulous, they recorded the positions of planets, stars, constellations, and basically created what you might call a celestial clock.
A celestial clock. That's pretty awesome. So how does this clock actually work, and how can it possibly help us unravel a historical mystery from thousands of years ago?
Well, think of it this way. The stars are like a giant clock face. And ancient astronomers used the movements of the planets against this backdrop to mark the passage of time.
Okay.
They were incredibly skilled observers, mapping the cycles of the sun, moon, planets with impressive accuracy.
So they were like the ultimate timekeepers. But I'm guessing this clock isn't as straightforward as the one on my wall.
Haha, no, you're absolutely right. There's this fascinating wrinkle that's called precession.
Okay.
And it's a slow wobble of the Earth's axis that basically makes the stars appear to shift position over thousands of years. So think of it as like a really, really slow hand on our celestial clock.
Okay.
Taking almost 26,000 years to make one full circle.
Wow. Okay, so because of this precession thing, the arrangement of planets in the sky is constantly changing, right?
Exactly. Any specific planetary alignment where all the planets are in a particular arrangement, that's incredibly rare.
Oh, wow.
We're talking about combinations that wouldn't repeat for tens of thousands of years, kind of like unique fingerprints in time.
So that means if we have detailed descriptions of planetary positions from a specific event, we could potentially use this celestial clock to find that exact moment in history.
Exactly. And that's precisely where the Valmiki Ramayana comes in.
Oh, okay.
It's considered a contemporary account of Ram's life, potentially written by a sage who knew Ram personally.
Wait, so this wasn't just some story passed down for generations. It was like firsthand reporting. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's what makes it so valuable for this kind of astronomical dating. And what's really cool is, unlike a lot of other ancient texts, the Ramayana features a series of planetary positions that are mentioned in a chronological sequence.
Oh, wow.
It's like having time-stamped clues throughout the story, which allows us to potentially track the dates of different events.
Okay, so we've got this amazing celestial clock, and the Ramayana actually provides us with specific planetary positions for different events in Ram's life.
Right.
This is starting to feel like a real-life detective story.
Yeah,
But I'm guessing it gets even more complex than that.
it does. But I think before we jump into the intricate details of those planetary positions, we should talk about the Yuga system in Hindu cosmology.
Okay.
Understanding this system of vast cosmic cycles will help us grasp the true significance of the dates we're about to uncover.
You're right. I'll give our listener a quick overview of the Yuga system before we delve into the nitty-gritty of planetary alignments.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the Yuga system is basically a cyclical view of time with four distinct yugas, or epochs: Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga.
Oh.
And each yuga has a specific duration and is associated with a certain level of virtue and spiritual evolution.
So it's like a cosmic roller coaster
Yeah.
with humanity rising and falling in virtue over vast periods.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And according to the system, we're currently in the Kali Yuga, the Age of Darkness,
Right.
which is characterized by a decline in morality and spiritual awareness.
Okay, that explains a lot. So how does all this connect to Lord Ram and the dates we're trying to figure out? I'm guessing the Ramayana places Ram within a specific yuga, right?
Exactly. The Valmiki Ramayana places Lord Ram in the Treta Yuga, an age known for its higher level of virtue compared to the Kali Yuga.
Okay.
And as we start analyzing those planetary positions, we'll discover that the dates we uncover have some fascinating implications for our understanding of the entire Yuga system.
This is getting really interesting. Okay, so we've got our celestial clock, our time-stamped clues from the Ramayana, and now this fascinating backdrop of the Yuga system.
Right.
Let's get to the heart of the mystery. When was Lord Ram actually born?
So the Ramayana provides us with remarkably detailed descriptions of the planetary positions at the moment of Ram's birth.
Okay.
For example, it states that the sun was in Aries, Saturn in Libra, Jupiter in Cancer, Venus in Pisces, Mars in Capricorn.
Wow.
And it even specifies the lunar month, the day after the new moon, even the constellation rising in the east at the time.
Wow, that's a lot of detail. So how do we even begin to narrow down a date from all of that information? It sounds incredibly complex.
It is complex, but that's where the brilliance of Botnagar's approach comes in. He meticulously entered all these planetary positions into specialized astronomical software that's capable of calculating the positions of celestial bodies for any given date in history.
So he's basically using this software to sift through thousands of years of astronomical data to find this one precise alignment. It's like finding a needle in a cosmic haystack.
Exactly. And remember that precession cycle we talked about?
Yeah.
Well, that's the slowest moving element in this cosmic clock.
Okay.
So Bhatnagar starts by trying to find dates in the past when the sun was in Aries during the lunar month of Chaitra, which is when Ram is said to have been born.
Okay, so it's like starting with the biggest piece of the puzzle first.
Yeah.
Did he find a match? What did the software reveal?
He did, and the results are pretty astounding.
Oh, wow.
The software identifies 10 January 5114 BC as a date when all the described planetary positions align perfectly.
For 5114 BC, that's thousands of years earlier than most estimates for the Ramayana.
Right.
What are the implications of such a dramatic timeline shift?
Well, that's a fantastic question,
Yeah.
and one that takes us to the heart of this investigation. But before we jump into those implications, we need to consider something else. How do we know that this date isn't just a coincidence?
Right. One data point, even if it's a remarkable alignment, doesn't necessarily prove anything definitively.
Right.
We need more evidence.
We need more evidence, absolutely. And thankfully, the Ramayana provides us with another layer of verification.
Okay.
Eclipses.
Eclipses. How can those help us verify this 5114 BC date?
Because eclipses are rare and predictable events.
Okay.
If the Ramayana accurately describes eclipses that occurred during specific moments in Ram's life,
Right.
and we can verify those eclipses using astronomical data, it would provide independent confirmation of the timeline we're exploring.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all fits together. It's like each piece of astronomical evidence is a clue.
Yeah.
And they all point to this potential date of 5114 BC for Ram's birth.
Right.
But how many eclipses does the Ramayana actually mention?
Wow.
And do they all line up with this proposed timeline?
Those are the questions we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Right.
Get ready,
Right.
because the astronomical detective work is about to get even more exciting.
So last time, we talked about a potential birth date for Lord Ram, 5114 BC,
Yeah.
right? Based on all this astronomical detective work. But I feel like we left off on a cliffhanger. The Ramayana, it mentions eclipses, and those could be a way to like really check if this timeline is accurate.
Yeah, exactly. Eclipses are kind of like celestial time stamps. They're rare and predictable events that help us anchor events in history.
So how many eclipses does the Ramayana even mention? And more importantly, do they line up with this 5114 BC date?
So the book actually analyzes 3 specific eclipses mentioned in the Ramayana, and each one provides like pretty fascinating evidence to support this timeline.
Okay.
The first one happens during the battle with Kar and Dushan, 2 demons that Ram encountered in the forest.
Okay, so this is the battle where Ram is said to have been 37 years old, is that right?
Exactly.
So that would put this event around 57.7 BC.
Exactly. The Ramayana very clearly mentions a solar eclipse visible at Panchavati, their location at the time, on that day of the battle. And guess what? The software confirms a partial solar eclipse on 7 October 5077 BC, visible from the location described as Panchavati.
Whoa, that's a trigger match. But was it just the date? Or did the description of the eclipse itself align with the astronomical data?
It gets even more interesting, actually. The Ramayana, it describes Mars being positioned right in the middle of a chain of visible planets during the eclipse. And remarkably, the software shows exactly that configuration for that 7 October 577 BC eclipse.
That's insane. It's like the Ramayana is painting this precise picture of the sky on that day, and the astronomical data confirms it thousands of years later. That can't be a coincidence.
That's what makes this whole approach so compelling. We're not just relying on like a single point of data, but on multiple independently verifiable astronomical events. And it's not just that eclipse either. The book also analyzes a solar eclipse during the killing of Bali, a rival monkey king, and a lunar eclipse during Hanuman's visit to Lanka to find Sita.
And do those eclipses also match up with this timeline?
They do. The software confirms the dates and visibility of both of these eclipses just based on the descriptions given in the Ramayana. So we have three separate eclipses, each providing independent confirmation of this 5114 BC timeline.
That's some seriously impressive detective work. I mean, it's really making me rethink what I thought I knew about the Ramayana.
But if we're shifting the timeline of Ram's life back thousands of years, what does that mean for our understanding of the Yuga system?
You're right to ask that. Remember, the Yuga system is this vast cyclical view of time in Hindu cosmology. And if Ram's era is actually much earlier than traditionally thought, it means we need to take a fresh look at the entire Yuga timeline.
Okay, so this is where I start to get a little lost. Can you walk us through how this new timeline might impact our understanding of the Yugas? All right, let's start with the Kali Yuga, the current age we're living in. Traditionally, it's believed to have begun in 3102 BC. But Bhatnagar, using this astronomical approach, he looked for a specific celestial event that ancient texts say coincided with the start of the Kali Yuga, a seven-planet conjunction at the Revati Nakshatra.
Hold on, Nakshatra, what's that?
Oh, right. So a nakshatra is basically like a constellation in Western astronomy. It's a specific section of the sky that was used in ancient Indian astronomy. So here we're talking about all the planets visible with the naked eye, all clustered together near the star Zeta Piscium in the Pisces constellation.
Okay, got it. So Bhatnagar was looking for this seven-planet conjunction around 3102 BC.
Exactly, and here's where it gets really interesting. The software found a remarkably precise seven-planet conjunction at Revati, but it places it on 22 January 3101 BC, so almost a full year earlier than the traditional date.
Wow, so we're actually potentially shifting the start of the Kali Yuga itself. That's huge.
Yeah.
But what does that have to do with Lord Ram?
Well, this is where the puzzle starts to come together. The date identified for this conjunction, 22 January 3101 BC, it also happens to be the start of the Chaitra month, which, if you remember, is the same month when Ram was born, according to the Ramayana.
Wait a minute, so you're saying this seven-planet conjunction, it pinpoints the start of the Kali Yuga, and it happens to be Ram's birth month. That can't just be a random coincidence.
It's a pretty incredible alignment, right? It suggests a connection between Ram's era and the larger Yuga cycle. It's almost like the start of the Kali Yuga marked this major cosmic shift, and Ram's birth was somehow synchronized with that transition.
Okay, this is blowing my mind. But if we're adjusting the start of the Kali Yuga based on this astronomical data, does that mean we have to adjust the other yugas too?
Yes, you got it. Remember, the Yuga system is cyclical. Each Yuga has a set duration. If we change the start of the Kali Yuga to 3101 BC, it means the entire timeline of the Yuga system is pushed back. For instance, the Trita Yuga, which is the age when Ram lived, that would have ended in 5101 BC according to this adjusted timeline.
Which is incredibly close to that 5114 BC date that Bhatnagar got for Ram's birth, based on those planetary positions. It's like all these pieces are fitting together so perfectly.
It is pretty remarkable how these findings from different areas, astronomy, ancient texts, and the Yuga system, all point to this earlier timeline for Ram's era. But there's another piece of evidence we need to consider, the Saraswati River.
Oh, right. The Saraswati River is mentioned a lot in the Ramayana, but it dried up thousands of years ago, right? How does that fit into this new timeline?
That's a great question. And it leads us to even more evidence supporting this earlier dating of the Ramayana. We know from geological and archaeological studies that the Saraswati used to be a massive river, but it dried up around 3000 BC.
So because the Ramayana describes it as a flowing river, that must mean that those events had to have happened before it dried up, right?
You got it. This geological evidence just adds another independent point of verification, lining up perfectly with the astronomical and textual evidence we've been discussing.
This is all so fascinating. But I gotta admit, it's kind of a lot to take in. We've potentially changed the start of the Kali Yuga, realigned the whole Yuga system, and even used geological evidence to support this new timeline. It's a lot.
It's definitely a lot to process, and it brings up some pretty big questions about how we understand ancient history. But I think before we dive into those questions, it's important to take a step back. You know, beyond all the dates and astronomical calculations, there's the heart of the Ramayana, the story of Lord Ram.
Yeah, you're right. We've been so focused on the when that we haven't really talked about the who and the why. Why does any of this even matter? What is the significance of Lord Ram's story, and how might this new understanding of his era change our perspective?
Those are the questions we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned, because we're about to connect these incredible astronomical findings to the profound and timeless message of the Ramayana.
Okay, so We've gone pretty deep with all this astronomical evidence, recalibrated the Yuga timeline, even looked at geological clues. But it's easy to get lost in the dates and numbers.
Right.
What we really want to understand is like the core of it all, like the significance of Lord Ram's story itself.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Ramayana has captivated people for thousands of years, and its relevance goes way beyond figuring out exactly when and where everything happened.
Exactly. It's like woven into the very fabric of Indian culture and spirituality, right? People find guidance and inspiration in the Ramayana. It's a story that really speaks to what it means to be human.
Yeah, and that's what makes this whole dating exercise so fascinating. It's not about diminishing the spiritual meaning at all.
Right.
It's about enriching our understanding of the context,
Yeah.
when it first emerged.
When I first started looking into this, I was really struck by the fact that if Ram really did live in 5114 BC, like this book suggests, it pushes the timeline of ancient Indian civilization way back.
Yeah, that's a huge realization.
Right.
We're talking about a sophisticated society with advanced astronomical knowledge, complex social structures, deep philosophical ideas, thousands of years earlier than we usually think.
It really challenges our assumptions about how civilizations began and evolved. It's like we found this hidden chapter in the human story.
It really does make you wonder, what other historical mysteries could we unravel if we looked at other ancient texts and traditions through this astronomical lens?
It makes you think, have we been underestimating the scientific knowledge of ancient cultures?
Yeah.
For way too long.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And while some historians might not totally agree with these findings,
Right.
it's important to remember this is like a fresh perspective,
Yeah.
a new way of looking at the past. It's an invitation to reevaluate our assumptions and, explore new areas of research.
So I know some of our listeners are probably thinking, okay, that's interesting, but why should I care about when Lord Ram might have lived?
Right.
How would you answer that question?
I think it's about, expanding our awareness, challenging those preconceived notions that we have.
Okay.
It's about recognizing the incredible depth and complexity of history and just appreciating the wisdom that these ancient cultures possess. There's still so much we can learn from the past.
It's about connecting with our roots and understanding where the ideas and beliefs that shape our world, came from.
Yeah, absolutely. The Ramayana, no matter when it happened, it gives us deep insights into the human condition.
Yeah.
It goes beyond time and place, reminding us of things like integrity, compassion, and courage, those values.
It's amazing how even when things were tough, Ram never gave up on his dharma. His story shows us that we all have the potential for greatness, no matter what our situation is.
Exactly. And as we deal with the craziness of the modern world, maybe these timeless lessons are even more important now.
Yeah.
The Ramayana reminds us that even in the darkest times, we can choose to stand up for our values, fight for what's right.
Yeah.
And in the end, good will always win over evil.
It's a message of hope, resilience, and the power of the human spirit, wouldn't you say?
I think so.
It's about seeing the divinity within ourselves and trying to live a life that has purpose and meaning.
And maybe as we're exploring all these astronomical mysteries surrounding the Ramayana, we're also rediscovering the wisdom that's in those verses.
Yeah.
It's like an invitation to look deeper, to question things.
Right.
And to stay open to the wonders that history has to offer.
I think that's the perfect way to wrap up this deep dive.
Yeah.
It's been an amazing journey, and I feel like we're really just getting started. There's still so much to learn. I can't wait to see where this new understanding of history leads us. And to everyone listening, don't be afraid to question things, to explore, and to stay open to all the possibilities that the past holds. The Ramayana, regardless of exactly when it took place, it offers us timeless wisdom and inspiration for our lives today. And who knows what other mysteries we might uncover if we keep searching, keep learning, and keep asking questions.